Hello and welcome to Retro Format Live Q&A. I'm Sean P. Malone, cinematographer and proud board member at Retro Format Silent Films. We're an LA-based nonprofit dedicated to keeping the art and history of silent cinema alive. You've just joined us for our screening of Hot Water, and I have a very special guest with me, Harold Lloyd's granddaughter, Suzanne Lloyd. We've talked to her several times, and she always has something new to share about her grandfather's work and legacy. Today we're going to talk a little bit about Hot Water, and we're going to talk a little bit about Harold's photography hobby. We're going to share some of his beautiful photography images with you. Suzanne, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Sean. It's wonderful to be back here for Retro Format. And you guys always put on wonderful programming. So it's my honor to be here.
Thank you so much. Well, we're always pleased when you come on the show, and I know our fans love it. Let's talk a little bit about Hot Water. This is kind of a unique film in that it's kind of reminiscent of his shorts, reminiscent of his features, all at the same time. What was the story behind this film, and what makes it unique among his film catalog?
Well, when he did this film, it came after Girl Shy, and he was married. He shot it at his own studio on Santa Monica and Las Palmas, which is now the General Service Studios, but it was the Harold Lloyd Corporation Studios that he built. And this film was a diversion from the single kind of, go-getter, happy-go-lucky, romantic, but also the guy that always kind of befelled and had a little trouble going on. He played a married man. And this is the only film that he'd ever played a married man in. And I don't know. He did tell me, he said, I didn't like playing a married man. I didn't feel that in comedy I could get that much humor out of being married because I couldn't carry it. I couldn't get, even though he gets into a lot of trouble in this movie, a lot of trouble. But from crashing the car to going to the market to everything else to thinking that he's basically murdered his mother-in-law to, being in trouble with his brother-in-law and of course his newlywed wife. But he just said he didn't think he could get as much play as being a romantic comedy. So this is the only film he ever produced or ever starred in or ever used the character, the Harold Glasses character, as a married man.
That's one of the things I loved about it. Obviously, it's not his normal thing. So it's funny to see him. We did a Charlie Chase show a few times ago, and Charlie Chase was known more for situational comedy, and it was fun to see Harold in that. More like a sitcom setting, where he had to deal with in-laws and the third part of the movie, or the third act, where he thinks he killed his mother-in-law.
It's crazy, and he's so upset. He's so upset about it, and it's just such a, it was just such a mistake, but he really believed it. But the mother-in-law, oh my gosh, she drove him crazy, from taking over on how he should drive the car to the scarf in his face to, being screamed at, and the brother-in-law just, completely beating him up. And the wife, she's so scared I think she's very scared of her mother. I mean, the mother just ran the whole show. And he didn't want to offend his new wife. I mean, look at him going to the market. And he thinks, I'm going to have to get a raffle ticket. And then he wins the raffle. And what are you going to do? It wasn't like bringing home a dog you won. You won a turkey. You get trapped on a trolley with a turkey. Whoever came up with that, I think that was just so brilliant. But, but he liked to try other things and to see where he could take his character. And he always got in trouble with any of his characters that he played. But this was just a little more restrictive. You're right. It was like a sitcom, or kind of like, meet the parents.
I wondered, like, you mentioned he wasn't too crazy about it, but what about it do you think, like, he couldn't get as much play out of it, or what did he dislike about, or maybe not want to repeat about playing a married man and being in that scenario?
He, like in Girl Shy, he could set up scenarios with different girls of the boy that was the sharing the show of the secrets of writing the book, The Secrets of Making Love, so he could go into a little fantasy about different people. When, he was doing Safety Last, he was trying to impress the girl. The chase of getting the girl, because he was married, was taken out of the equation. Do you understand?
Sure. Yeah, of course.
He had the girl. So it had to be things around he and the girl, not just him solely, because it affected the family or his wife. I don't know. Another thing is he was also married, and he had, a child at home who was my mother. Maybe he was just tired of all, maybe he was just like up late at night or something with his own child and went, oh, I don't know if this is worth it.
Sure. Maybe he's a little too close to home. Yeah.
Maybe it was a little, I don't know. Maybe it was a little too close to home, but he did, raise 3 children, and then he ended up raising me. So I guess he liked being around children, and he loved being around kids and young adults and teenagers. So he was a pretty big kid himself. But I think that he just felt that being a single man in a romantic comedy was easier. If you think about Rock Hudson, he usually played single men. He wasn't married. James Garner with the Doris Day movies, the only time he was Move Over Darling, where he was married, which was a remake of, what is it? My Two Wives with Cary Grant and Randolph Scott. So most of the comedians were single.
That's a good point. In this film, we get to see him also with a new leading lady, new meaning after Mildred had married Harold and started a family with him. What can you tell us about Sabina Ralston and how she got involved with Lloyd's filmmaking company?
Well, Jabina was hired by Hal Roach, and she was doing shorts for him. So she was kind of in the pull pack of the studio.
Yeah, and I said Sabina, I meant Jabina. That's
Jabina. Well, that's right. He used to call her Joby. That was her nickname. Okay. And she starred in 8 films with him, and she started in 1923 in Why Worry, right after Safety Last. And that was Harold's last film for Roach. And he was building a studio then, and then he went to do Girl Shy in 1924 at the studio, and Jabina went with him. And then she kept going. She was in The Freshman. She was in Hot Water. She was in For Heaven's Sake. She was in Kid Brother. I mean, so he loved working with her. And actually, they really had kind of a little relationship together, shall we say, a little affair that sometimes happens between leading ladies and their handsome gentleman leads. But she went off and she retired after Kid Brother, and she went and married Richard Arland, who was a leading man, very handsome man. And they just had some great chemistry together. And she was a different type than my grandmother. She had brown hair. She had dark eyes. Before my grandmother, he had Bibi Daniels, and she had really dark hair and really dark brown eyes. And my grandmother was a blue-eyed blonde, So he kind of switched them up to having a different look for a leading lady. But he kept Jabina there for almost 8 years.
Well, you mentioned your mom, and you mentioned Harold's home life, and I think that's a good segue maybe into the next part of our time together, which is to look at some of Harold's photographs. But before I pull some of these up, and by the way, Suzanne, thank you so much for letting us show these and for letting us incorporate this into the show.
This was his big passion, 3D photography. Besides making movies, he loved 3D photography. He shot over 200,000 photographs in 3D.
Wow.
All over the world, you know, people, places, things. He had that camera with him almost all of the time. And when we traveled, he traveled, you know, a 3D camera, you have to shoot 2 frames of a 35 millimeter roll. So a roll comes with 36 photographs. So you only get half those photographs. So you only basically get 18 photographs because you're shooting 2 at a time, right eye, left eye. And when I got older, he'd always have 2 or 3 cameras with him because he'd shoot and then he'd change it off and then he'd shoot another one. I had the wonderful job of being a camera loader for him. And also, and you'll see in some of these photographs, I'll explain, he was always getting people in the house, the family dogs, whatever, to kind of like if he got a new piece of equipment or a new strobe or a new light meter or a different lens or something, we always fell victim to being somebody he was dragged in to be the model or the guinea pig for the new equipment of photography.
Right.
He was a great photographer. He had a great eye for it. But he also had a good eye for a 35 millimeter camera, and he worked very closely with his cinematographers. And you can see that, how the film that we just saw, Hot Water, was shot.
Let me pull the first one up here, and while I do that, I'll ask you, how did he get into this? Like, what was his initiation, or maybe the spark that led him to do 3D photography? Well, let me bring that up right now.
Well, he started really very early in 1924 with 3D photography, and he brought on the first film that he was doing, Girl Shy. He brought it onto his set at his studio to take 3D photographs, or they're really keystones, they called them, of Girl Shy, and also of the house he was building of Green Acres. And in fact, the only outtakes that we have of Girl Shy from 1924 are these keystone stereographic photographs. Now here's Harold, and this is, obviously he's not taking the picture, but this is in his library at Green Acres holding a book out. And this in 3D is just, it's fabulous. It really pops out.
Yeah.
And he always believed, and he said this, and in fact, he said it in the Los Angeles Times in an interview in 1925. He said, they said, Harold, what do you think's coming to film, and how do you feel about it? And he said, well, color's here. We haven't put it on up on the screen yet for the public, but color is here. And we know films can talk, and we'll have talking films. He said the most inventive and the biggest change to film, besides the invention of the motion picture, will be 3D or realistic stereo, or a form of that in motion pictures. So what you have now in 3D virtual reality, he said that will change the scope of how pictures and films are made.
Yeah.
So he believed in it very strongly. And he said that in a number of oral history at Columbia, USC, AFI. I mean, he just repeated, he believed it, and it came true.
He was ahead of his time in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, he was. He could see it. and he believed in it too, you know. Okay, so here we have Harold traveling. This is in Tennessee on a photo trip. But in 1947, Harold in 1948 was going to go in with his other passion, was being a Mason and a Shriner. And he was going in to be the head Shriner in 1948, 49. And he knew he was going to be traveling a lot. And he said, hey, Harold, you're going to travel almost, you know, all over the United States, Canada, and Mexico. This is a great new camera. Why don't you just take it with you and see how you go? And he gave him the camera for a weekend, and he said, just shoot around the house and see what you think. Well, by the end of the weekend, he couldn't believe it, and he was so hooked. He started taking this camera with him everywhere from 1947 on. So he shot from 1947 to the end of 1970.
Did you get to, I know you mentioned traveling with him overseas. Did you get to go on a lot of trips with him?
Oh, yes, I did. I went on a lot of trips with him. I started when I was 2 with my grandparents, and they're my grandparents.
Yeah, there they are.
Right there in the poplar garden. And if you notice, Harold's got a light meter. And I have a feeling that he got her out in the garden and said, get dressed up. I've got to test out this new light meter I got, because that looks like very much of a setup to me. As I was definitely pulled into a lot of that.
And speaking of which, we've got a beauty coming up here.
Oh, well, this is down in here. This is a Green Acres, and this was a fabulous swimming pool. This was an Olympic-sized swimming pool, and actually, Buster Crabbe taught my aunt and my mom and my aunt and my uncle how to swim in that pool, and we had a lot of fun in that pool. That silly little umbrella hat, I loved that, and it was worn a lot by a man named Roy Brooks, who was starred in Harold's films and a number of shorts and in Safety Last. And he became Harold's executive assistant for years. And he actually cut the 3D slides and mounted them for Harold. And he had his own apartments on the estate. And he was fabulous. Well, if you're a grandfather and you have a young granddaughter, don't you take her to Disneyland? So we're at Disneyland, except he hated the teacups. He didn't like spinning. For somebody who could hang off of buildings and hang onto ledges and walk on girders, he did not like spinning in teacups. But
I can't say that I blame him. When my nieces want to go on those things, I have to really think twice.
Yes. Well, he never let me touch the center there. If you spin the wheel, you go faster and faster.
Yeah.
So I usually talk somebody else into it.
You look here like you're dressed like Alice from Alice in Wonderland. Is that the case?
I don't know. Some other people said that, but no, I think that was kind of the style. I wore a lot of those little dresses with the white Peter Pan collars and the puffy sleeves. That's just kind of how my grandmother dressed me.
Well, you're adorable, Suzanne.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you.
Here we got another Disneyland pick.
Oh, this is one of my favorites. Gosh, I love that TWA rocket. It's fabulous. And just the way he composed that picture, it's so striking. And, it's amazing. I've printed this picture up as a print. And the color is so rich and vibrant. It's a great.
I think this was the Rocket to the Moon attraction, right?
It is the Rocket to the Moon.
When I was a kid, they had changed it to Rocket to Mars, but I got to experience it.
This is in this was shot at 55, right when the park opened.
Yeah, you had told me that these were like right as Disneyland opened, and that's just incredible to me.
To the previews of Disneyland right before
Oh,
the
okay.
opening. And then, but of course, I went down there with Dad a lot. I mean,
So tell me about that. You got to go on like a preview day. Was that like a week before it opened, a month?
I guess I was
You
pretty little,
you were tiny,
so I
yeah.
wasn't too sure. I just knew I went to Disneyland, and then we go back and back, and then we'd sometimes spend the night, and we go back again. So, in fact, the last time I was that he went to Disneyland, he took me and my girlfriend, my boyfriend, her boyfriend. We all went down there, and oh my gosh, we were 18 right after I graduated from high school. He loved Disneyland.
Have you ever seen that special Disneyland After Dark with Annette Funicello and has Louis Armstrong and a bunch of stars in it?
Yes, I have. And
I
I
mean,
think
I would think that would be around that time, right? That
yeah,
around that time you went.
exactly. In some of our pictures is the Mickey Mouse Theater, and it's not there anymore. And the Mouseketeers used to come down and do a show a week in the Mickey Mouse Theater.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, it's very cool.
Like the actual Musketeers that were on TV.
Yeah, the real, yeah, Sharon and Bobby and Annette and
Oh,
Roy. Yeah, they'd be down there. Also, Guy Madison, who played Zorro, he come down there and do sword fights and things.
here we have. Speaking of American legends,
Well, we have the two of them, and they were pretty good friends. And this was shot. Bob was making a film at Paramount, and and Dad was there at Paramount doing something. So somebody snapped this picture with Harold's camera, with Bob Hope. But they were pretty good friends. They played golf together, and they also, both of them, did so much for charity.
yeah.
Harold did so much for the children, for the Shriners Hospitals, and running 22 hospitals, and then forming and starting the Burns Institute for the Shriners, and Bob with the, USO. Just amazing work for people who could give back to people and really make a big difference and impact. I mean, what Bob Hope did with the troops, there's never been anybody like him.
Yeah. Well, you just have to look around LA and see all the places named after Bob Hope to see what an impact he left.
Hmm. Amazing. So here's
Here,
probably one of the most memorable and famous movie stars in the world. Uh, you have Marilyn Monroe.
I I love this picture. I mean, on the one hand, I know it's probably hard to take a bad picture of Marilyn Monroe, but I got to give Harold credit on this one because this him capturing her in this relaxed but still really classy moment, getting ready. I just think it's great.
Yeah, and you can kind of see the corner of the photographer if you saw it in 3D, and you see the pole for the light.
How often how often did this occur at your house where famous people would come over and Harold would photograph them?
He would host the Los Angeles film photography school, and they'd bring a lot of models up to the house, and that would happen, a few times a year, and then people would ask to do photo shoots. Capitol Records did some really beautiful shoots for their album covers, and because Harold was really into stereo music too, I think he just loved the word stereo. It was like more, better, and best or something. But this was done for a shoot that Harold and Marilyn had kind of collaborated on, and so she came up to the house. And I don't know, a lot of the time, I must say that I went to school, so some of this happened during the day. When this was shot, actually, I was only 7 months old.
Oh,
But I do know that my mom was at the photo shoot, and Marilyn wanted, she said she just had a child, and Marilyn said, well, and she'd been wanting, she was married to Joe DiMaggio, and she wanted to have a child. And she said, well, come on upstairs. And she said, take me and let me see your daughter. And that was me. But unfortunately, I don't remember it.
huh. Yeah, that's lovely. Did she hold you or?
Yeah, I guess she did. And
Yeah,
my mom said she was just lovely. And then Harold went on later to do a photo shoot the next year with her, and she was the cover of Life magazine. And he did that with Philippe Halsman. And Philippe was shooting her for the cover of Life magazine, and Philippe and Harold were good friends, and they actually shot together a lot. And Philippe shot Harold as being Harold Lloyd, the movie star. And Harold said, if Philippe said, come on, Harold, come over to Marilyn's apartment and shoot with me. So Harold has pictures of Philippe Halsman shooting Marilyn Monroe in 3D for the cover of Life magazine.
wow.
And it's the exact picture that's on Life magazine, but Harold's is in color in 3D.
I heard you right at the beginning. You said he had taken 200,000 3D photos. Is that right?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
Now, this one is at Green Acres, like a lot of them are. You lived there until you were a teenager, right? How long did you live at Green Acres?
I lived there for 20 years. And then I ran it as a museum for 3. So I wasn't physically living on the property, but I was physically running it.
Sure. I know this is a big question, but what are your just general memories of that place like? How do you feel about that place?
Well, luckily I was able to make it a National Historical Home, so it will never be torn down. And it has a plaque from the government. So it's like Mount Vernon or the White House. So that's fabulous. And I fought really hard for that because
Yeah.
the house was on 16 acres. It's now on 8. A wonderful gentleman owns it named Ron Burkle, and it just went through a huge restoration. What do I know about the house? Well, I don't know. What do you say? It was my home. It was the place I lived with the people I loved, and I grew up there. So, I learned how to ride a bike there. I learned how to drive a car on the property. I learned how to swim there and play tennis, and I had my dolls there, and I had a dollhouse to play in.
Sure.
It was just, you know,
And your umbrella hat.
and my umbrella hat, and wonderful, and I could have as many friends as I wanted to come over, and and I had people that loved me, even though I came from my parents were separated, and then got a divorce when I was very young, like a year and a half old, and it was magical, and all my friends had a great time, and my grandparents were very good about, they wanted people to enjoy the property and love it, and they were very carefree about letting people come over and enjoy it too. So they were really wonderful. It wasn't like I was really restricted. So I had a great time. I miss my swimming pool.
I had a pool growing up too, and it wasn't as big as that one, but it was pretty special.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting another pool. Now this is one of my ultimate all-time favorite shots. I don't know. There's something so magical about this. And
I
this
agree.
is Monument Valley, but look at the composition, how he caught that with the little girl and the little lamb and the black lamb and the mom or the woman behind that. And then, of course, the terrain or the mountains or whatever you want to call it, the precipice behind there. It's just amazing. It's an amazing photograph.
I agree. This one stood out to me when you sent these over to us as the most beautiful of the bunch. I feel like, like what John Ford captured in his Westerns, you can kind of see that feeling here.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Well, this last image is not one of his photographs, but actually a poster that we had an artist do. And the artist happens to be my best friend, but that's another story. But it's a beautiful piece of art that we were going to use to promote the Safety Last screening at the Legion Theater, which unfortunately got postponed due to COVID. And I just hadn't shown you this yet, and I wanted to show you this beautiful artwork. And
it's magnificent. It's great. Oh, and I love how he's positioned in front of the clock. It's very fun. It's got a lot of movement to it and character. Well, who is your friend? What's his name?
My friend's name is Sean Rangel. I went to middle and high school with him, and he now lives in Canada, but he's a brilliant artist.
Oh, this is great. I love it. Well, we'll get back. We'll get back next year and be able to do this. We're going to beat COVID-19, and we'll get a new outlook on our lives, and we'll get a vaccine, and things will kind of go off on a very healthy path for America.
Absolutely. And that's why I wanted to share it, because I wanted to remind our viewers who have been sticking with us through the online shows and really enjoying the online shows, that when it's safe, we want to get back in the theaters and continue bringing shows both online and in theaters. And we're so excited to partner with you, Suzanne, for future shows.
I've got to tell you, it's been wonderful. And I thank you, and I thank everybody, Tom Barnes, who, has been behind this all the way and reached out to me. And I'm thrilled to do it. And I'm so happy that everybody enjoys watching Harold.
Us too. Well, Suzanne, thanks again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. I can't thank you enough for joining us, talking about Hot Water, showing us these pictures, sharing your memories. It really warms my heart. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you, Sean. Thank you. My pleasure.
And thank you out there for joining us for another edition of Retro Format Live and Retro Format Live Q&A. We're so happy to have you. And if you enjoyed the show tonight, we'd ask you please consider making a suggested donation of $7 to Retro Format Silent Films by visiting our website, retroformat.org/donate. Your support really does mean the world to us. Thanks again, and we hope to see you in a couple more weeks for the next version of Silent Movie Mondays. I'm Sean P. Malone. Thanks for watching.